Rod's story is moving. I wish it was unusual. Rod physically lost his son when his mother killed Eric rather than allow Eric and his father to have a loving and bonded relationship. This occurs in each and every family. Only in most families, the death is not physical, it's psychological. The aligned narcissistic borderline parent kills the child's relationship with the other parent. The targeted rejected parent used to have a child before the divorce, but after the divorce, they no longer have children. The child refuses to spend any time with the targeted parent, and what little time is spent together is marked by the child's excessive hostility, conflict, and the child's efforts to avoid and isolate from the parent. Soon the child refuses all visitation to the targeted parent, leading to parents who deeply love their children not seeing their children for years. 4 years. The parents used to have a child before the divorce, but the pathology of the narcissistic borderline parent kills the child's relationship with the other parent as surely as Eric died at his mother's hands. As a clinical psychologist, I've worked with all types of pathology, ADHD, trauma, autism, and this is the most horrific pathology I have ever encountered in my professional practice. To kill someone's children in revenge for the divorce and to use the child as the weapon to coerce and manipulate the child into psychologically killing their own parent is abhorrent. I came across my first case of this attachment pathology surrounding divorce about a decade ago when I entered private practice. Despite a career in professional psychology in which I had treated nearly every form of child and family pathology, I had never heard of the word parental alienation. You see, there's no such thing as parental alienation in clinical psychology. Oh, the pathology exists. It's extensively described in clinical psychology. We just haven't made up a new form of pathology unique in all of mental health to describe it. In clinical psychology, this pathology is described as a cross-generational coalition by the preeminent family systems therapists Murray Bowen, Salvador Medici, and Jay Haley. The pathology of a cross-generational coalition and the psychological boundary violations that cause it, called a perverse triangle, is extensively described in the family systems literature. Family systems therapy is one of the 4 primary schools of psychotherapy, and it's the only school to address current family relationship problems. As I entered into the domain of forensic court-involved psychology, I became appalled and shocked by the incredibly poor standards for knowledge and for standards of practice in forensic psychology, which are substantially below the standards for knowledge and standards of practice in clinical psychology. My first discovery was that forensic psychology simply makes up new forms of pathology that are not grounded in established psychological principles and constructs. They just make this stuff up. Like this supposedly new form of pathology, parental alienation. Then when I looked into how forensic psychology was defining this supposedly new form of pathology, it is an amazingly bad definition. The quality of the definition for parental alienation in forensic psychology is again substantially below the standards of practice in clinical psychology. They are simply making this stuff up. Again, this pathology absolutely exists. There's no arguing with the truth of Rod McCall and the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of families experiencing this pathology. It's just that the definition offered by forensic psychology is incredibly poor, unsupported by the professional literature, and substantially below the professional standards of practice. So as a clinical psychologist, I set about defining the pathology, the attachment-related family pathology people call parental alienation, using the standard and established constructs and principles of professional psychology. That's my book, Foundations. Foundations is not a theory, it's a diagnostic treatise. In clinical psychology, we absolutely know what this pathology is, using the standard and established constructs and principles of professional psychology. And we don't ever resort to making up new forms of pathology for types of child symptoms that we may not understand because of our ignorance. That's what an attachment-based model of parental alienation is, ABPA. It's a return of clinical psychology to court-involved practice. In my writings, I always put the term parental alienation in quotes to indicate that it's not a real form of pathology in clinical psychology, but instead represents a common culture term created within forensic psychology for a complex attachment-related personality disorder, family systems, developmental trauma pathology. Forensic psychology is sacrificing children to a horrific family pathology that requires the child to psychologically kill a beloved parent following divorce. The child used to have a mother or father, yet after the manipulative influence of the narcissistic borderline parent, the child's mother or father is now dead, at least psychologically and relationally to the child. The child no longer has a mother, the child no longer has a father, even though they do. Even though their mother and father is still here and desperately wants to love the child.